the very first Sherlock Holmes story, A Study in Scarlet.
After Inspector Gregson had strutted about, boasting of his theory, and after poor Lestrade had been shown up with his own missteps, Holmes leaned back in his chair with that quiet, unreadable smile of his. I knew that when Holmes wore such an expression, there was far more behind it than he let slip. And indeed, in this final chapter of our first strange adventure together, the light in the darkness, as Holmes put it, was soon to blaze out. It was late evening when Gregson left us, flushed with triumph at having, as he thought, solved the mystery of Enoch Drebber's death. He had arrested Arthur Charpentier, son of the lodging-house keeper, convinced he was guilty. Holmes said nothing to disturb him, but I could tell by the twinkle in his eye that he had not the smallest faith in Gregson's conclusion. Holmes stretched himself on the sofa, hands behind his head, pipe glowing gently in the dim light. "Watson," he said quietly, "have you ever noticed how quick men are to accept a theory so long as it explains away their difficulties, even when it ignores facts that stare them in the face?" "I've seen it often enough in medicine," I replied. "A man builds a whole diagnosis on a single symptom and forgets the rest." "Exactly, and Gregson is no better. He has one or two plausible points, but he cannot see beyond them. Still, his mistake serves us. Lestrade will likely blunder on the opposite side. Between the pair of them, they will make my work easier." I asked him then, "And what is your own conclusion, Holmes? You surely have one." He smiled. "Yes, Watson, I believe I am on the right track, but the net must close around the man before I speak. Until then, let us watch and wait." We sat in silence a while, the fire burning low. I could not help but think how strange my life had become since I had met this singular man. Only a few weeks ago, I had been a weary invalid from Afghanistan, drifting aimlessly through London. Now I found myself in the midst of a most extraordinary mystery, with the keenest intellect I had ever met guiding me through it. The next morning, Holmes was up before me. When I came down for breakfast, I found him at the table, dressed neatly, eating in a quiet, businesslike way. His eyes shone with suppressed excitement. "Watson," he said quietly, "the game is nearly over. The net is closing, and by tonight you shall see the criminal with your own eyes." I stared at him. "You mean you already know who he is?" "I have known for some time," he said calmly. "The difficulty was not in discovering who our man was, but in finding him. He has escaped the law's grasp more than once, but this time he shall not slip through." Before I could press him further, Mrs. Hudson came in with a note. Holmes tore it open, scanned it, and nodded. "Lestrade, of course. He wants me at his office immediately. Well, Watson, will you come with me? You are part of the story now, and it would be unfair to keep you from the end." We set out together into the brisk London air. As we rattled along in a cab, Holmes talked very little. He seemed wrapped in thought, his eyes gleaming with that inward fire I had learned to recognize. When at last we arrived at Scotland Yard, Lestrade met us in his brisk, sharp manner. "You are wanted, Mr. Holmes," he said quickly. "We've got the second man in the case." "The second man?" Holmes raised an eyebrow. "Yes, we've taken Stangerson, the secretary of Drebber. He was at Holiday's private hotel. We've been keeping an eye on him since yesterday." "And what do you accuse him of?" Holmes asked. "Well, of being concerned in the death of his master, of course. We thought it best to secure him before the news of Gregson's arrest leaked out. He seemed likely enough to bolt, so we sent a constable to fetch him in this morning." "And you have him here?" Lestrade's expression changed. "No, he's dead." "Dead? How?" "Stabbed through the heart, sir, just about 6 o'clock this morning. The landlady went up with his breakfast and found him lying across the bed stone dead, a wound from some long, sharp blade." Holmes' lips tightened, but he said nothing. "We traced the time," Lestrade went on. "He was seen alive at 5:30, talking with someone in his room. Then silence. An hour later he was dead. We found a bloody knife under the bed, but the murderer had gone. That's why we need you, Mr. Holmes. We're lost in the dark." Holmes nodded, his face grave. "Yes, Lestrade, quite lost, but perhaps not for long."
The news of Stangerson's death hit me like a blow. I glanced at Holmes, expecting surprise or alarm, but he remained calm, his expression unreadable, as though this development only confirmed what he already suspected. "Show me the room," Holmes said simply. We followed Lestrade through the yard and then by cab to Halliday's private hotel, a neat little place on the Strand. Up the staircase we went, and into a small but tidy bedroom. The blinds were half drawn, and a thin grey light filtered across the bed where the lifeless body of Joseph Stangerson lay. Holmes examined the corpse with professional precision. The wound was deep, clean, and fatal. The bedclothes were scarcely disturbed. On the table by the bed lay a small medicine bottle, nearly empty. Holmes sniffed it. "Pills?" he asked. Lestrade nodded. "Stangerson had a weak heart. He took these every night." Holmes examined the window. It had been left partly open, and the sill bore faint smears, as though a boot had rested there. Then his eye caught something. On the plastered wall, just above the bed's headboard, a word had been scrawled in blood, just as it had been at the Brixton Roadhouse. "Rache," Holmes murmured, leaning close. "Yes," said Lestrade. "Same as before. Revenge. Looks bad for Stangerson." Holmes said nothing, but I could see his eyes blazing with intensity. He crouched on the floor, studying a faint track of mud, then rose and carefully measured the footprint left near the window. After a long silence, he turned to Lestrade. "Your man is not the killer. He was a victim like Drebber. And the murderer," he paused, his voice dropping, "the murderer was here in this very room less than 4 hours ago." Lestrade looked uneasy. "But how do we catch him, Mr. Holmes? He's cleverer than the lot of us put together." Holmes slipped his magnifying glass back into his pocket. "On the contrary, Inspector, he is clever in only one way. In the rest he is clumsy. He has left me every clue I could wish for. The case is nearly solved." Back at Baker Street, Holmes was restless, pacing the sitting-room like a caged hawk. At last he rang for a messenger and scribbled a note. "Watson," he said, "it is time to spring the trap. I have written to the cab companies describing our man. He would be caught through his own trade. We need only bait the hook." Hours passed. I confess I was feverish with anticipation. Holmes, however, was cool as ever, sitting with his violin, playing soft, eerie strains that seemed to echo the tension of the moment. Evening fell. Lamps were lit, and still we waited. At last there came a knock. A small boy entered, cap in hand, carrying a note. Holmes read it, and his face lit with triumph. "Excellent, the very one I wanted. Watson, the cab we require waits outside. Come, bring your revolver." I snatched my pistol from the drawer, my heart pounding. We went down, and there in the street stood a four-wheeler cab, driver perched up on the box. Holmes whispered something to the man, then helped me inside. We rattled off through the London streets, the clatter of hooves loud in the night air. But then, with sudden swiftness, Holmes leant out of the window and called, "Now, Watson!" He sprang up, seized the driver by the collar, and dragged him bodily from the seat. The cab lurched, the horse shying, but Holmes held on like a steel trap. I rushed forward to help, revolver in hand. Between us, we overpowered him and had him pinned to the ground. The man struggled fiercely, cursing, but Holmes had slipped the handcuffs on with practiced ease. "Gentlemen," Holmes said, standing over him, "allow me to introduce Jefferson Hope, the murderer of Enoch Drebber and Joseph Stangerson." The man glared up at us, his chest heaving, his eyes wild but not afraid. "Yes," he spat, I killed them both. They deserved it, and by God, I'd do it again." Holmes looked at him calmly. "That, Watson, is the light in the darkness. The case is solved."
Up until now, I have told the story from my own position at Holmes's side, how we traced the mystery of Drebber and Stangerson in London, and how Holmes, with his unmatched deductive mind, solved it. But here the tale shifts. To understand why these men were killed, we must step far away from Baker Street, across the Atlantic, and into the harsh deserts of America. What follows is the true history of the murderer and his victims, a history Holmes later pieced together for me, and which I record here for completeness. Imagine, if you will, the endless wilderness of the American West. A vast desert stretches as far as the eye can see, blinding white and shimmering under a merciless sun. It is the Great Alkali Plain, an ocean of salt and dust, with nothing to shield a man from the fierce heat of day or the icy winds of night. Across this plain, under the burning sun, trudged a small, desperate caravan. Men, women, and children staggered onward, gaunt with hunger, lips cracked with thirst. Their wagons were broken, their oxen dying, and their supplies long gone. It was clear that unless help came soon, they would perish. At the head of this pitiful band walked a tall, stern-faced man with a long brown beard. He carried himself like a leader, though hardship had hollowed his cheeks and dimmed his eyes. This was John Ferrier. By his side, holding tightly to his hand, was a girl of about 5 years old, Lucy, the only child left alive from her parents, who had collapsed days before. Ferrier had taken her under his care, though he himself was little better off. The caravan's condition worsened with each passing hour. Children whimpered faintly, mothers stumbled with hollow stares, and the men, their strength nearly gone, kept trudging on in grim silence. Even Ferrier, as strong as he was, felt his limbs trembling. He carried Lucy in his arms for long stretches, whispering reassurances he barely believed himself. It was near sunset when salvation appeared. From the horizon a dark line rose, like a fleet of ships crossing the desert. As it drew nearer, the weary caravan saw it was another group of travelers, strong wagons, sturdy horses, and men who looked well-fed and capable. They moved with discipline and purpose. Ferrier summoned what strength he had left and waved his arm desperately. "Help us! For the love of God, help us!" he cried hoarsely. The approaching party halted. A tall man rode forward on horseback. His face was rugged, his eyes piercing. "Who are you people?" he demanded. "We are wanderers," Ferrier gasped. "We are dying. No food, no water. Have mercy." The horseman studied him a moment, then gestured to his men. "Bring water," he commanded. Within moments, the dying caravan was surrounded by barrels of water, bread, and dried meat. Children drank greedily, women wept with relief, and men clasped the stranger's hands in gratitude. The tall horseman dismounted and came closer to Ferrier and the little girl clinging to him. "You look as if you've carried more than your share," he said. "I've carried her as far as I could," Ferrier replied, his voice breaking. "She's all I've got left." The stranger's eyes softened. "You've got grit, friend. What's your name?" "John Ferrier." "And the child?" "Lucy. Not mine, but she's in my care now." The man nodded slowly. "Then both of you shall live. You've found us just in time. We are the chosen people of God, bound for a land where we may worship freely. You may come with us, but only if you accept our faith and our laws." Ferrier hesitated only a moment. He looked down at Lucy, her face pale and exhausted, and then back at the man. "Then I accept. Whatever keeps her alive, I accept." "Good," said the stranger. "I am Brigham Young, and I lead this people. From now on, you and the girl shall be counted among us." And so it was that John Ferrier and little Lucy joined the great Mormon migration, finding in that stern and determined people both salvation and a destiny that would one day link them to murder in faraway London.